Hey there, welcome to Board Game Hot Takes, the podcast where we give our immediate reactions to the hottest board games just minutes after playing them. My name's Jen.
And this is Chris.
This is Adam.
And this is Tim.
And we're going to give our hot takes on the game that we just finished playing, Rococo.
Before we jump into a description of the game, though, we got some poll results. I asked a question on Twitter this week. How many games do you own that you've never played? I said for myself, I was sitting at 1, and it's a review copy that I've punched. I'm learning the rules on, but I just haven't played it yet. That count just went up by 2 more this week. I got a couple more games in the mail. I asked people to tell us about their shelf of shame. So here were the options that I gave. 0 games, shameless. 1 to 5 games, low shame. 6 to 10 games, the shame is real. And 10 plus games, utterly shameful. Jen, hey, have you ever heard that term, shelf of shame?
That's a new term for me as soon as I saw the poll this week.
Okay.
So I actually have a shelf of shame and I didn't realize it. Feeling kind of weird. Mine are Sushi Go and Forbidden Island, I believe. So those are the 2 games I've never played that I own.
But you've played Sushi Go before, right? You just haven't played your
No.
copy? Oh, your kids have played it, though.
My kids have played it. Both you and your wife have played and taught and played with my kids, but I have never actually gotten to the table with Sushi Go before. And then Forbidden Island, same thing. You and my oldest played after he got it, and the rest of us got up and walked away from the table.
I don't think it counts if somebody in your family's opened and played the game. I don't think that's a shelf of shame. Somebody's gotten use out of it, so you're good.
I have a shelf of at this point in time, right? It's not the whole thing.
So you still have the 1 copy of the Castles of Burgundy that you overpaid for the old version of it, and still haven't taken the plastic wrap off, right? I think that counts.
Okay, yeah, my shelf of shame is the best game in the whole world, is what it is.
What about you, Adam? You mentioned you got a few games sitting there, right? How many do you have?
Yeah, I'm pushing the border there between that 10 and next category up. I put between 6 and 10, but I think that's a little conservative. It's in that 10 range, and I think I listed a few of them. I can't remember what I said, but I have some shame that I carry around with me.
What do you think it's going to take for you to get those off the list? Like, why aren't you playing them? Is it just you need to get in and learn the rules, or they're just not the right fit for the people you're playing with these days?
I don't even remember. I don't know. I think there's games that I don't even want to play anymore. I think some games I haven't just gotten to, like Stockpile is one of them. I know I've just had that game sitting there. I really want to play it. I just haven't found the group to break that open and play it with. I think it's better with, 3 or 4 or 5. The more people, the merrier on that kind of game.
Yeah.
So I just haven't had the chance to play it. Been in lockdown. You know what? There's no excuse. I've had that game like 2 years before COVID, and it's still just collecting dust. So a few of them are just, I haven't gotten them to the table. I have 18 Ireland and 18XX game that I'll probably never find the group for that. That'll probably just move to my shelf of try to sell this as soon as possible rather than the shelf of shame. That's where I'm sitting at. What about you, Chris? How's your shelf of shame looking?
I'm actually feeling pretty good right now because I had a pretty small shelf of shame to begin with. I think I had 3 games that I listed when I responded to Tim's original post on that. And one of them, he actually corrected me. We had played. I felt good about that. So there's one gone right there. Then there was 2 left, one of which was Nunami, which I've been dying to play. And I actually played tonight twice with my wife for the first time. So there's another one gone. And then the last one was a game that I just got like the end of last week. I got This War of Mine, which is the first game that I've ever actually bought with the intent of playing solo. And I got that set up and just started a game tonight. So I think I can actually check that one off as well. So I have 0 games on my shelf of shame. Drop the mic.
Amazing.
Now, Tim, before we talk about your shelf of shame, it seems like in the ever-changing world of definitions and poll clarifications, there's a few misunderstandings here. What game belongs on a shelf of shame? Is it one that hasn't been played? Is it one that you played at a friend's copy, but now you just haven't played it yet? Like what is a game on a shelf of shame?
Yeah, realistically, I honestly wouldn't count Jen's copy of Castles of Burgundy as a shelf of shame because you've played the game, you know it. It's not just like you bought it and you have no idea if you're ever going to play it or something like that. You just haven't gotten your copy played. So I honestly wouldn't count that one. I think a shelf of shame is a game that it was delivered to you or you bought it at a store and you've just never played it. You haven't played anyone else's copy. You haven't played your copy. You don't even know if you're going to like the game. It's just sitting there waiting to be played. That's a shelf of shame to me.
What if I've opened it up, punched out the stuff, read the rules, and then packed it back up and put it back on the shelf.
It's shameful.
Totally shameful.
Well, I've actually got a follow-up question for Adam on that one, but let's hear Tim first. Let's hear about Tim's shelf of shame.
Well, I mentioned already that I literally had one game that I'm in the middle of learning. It was a review copy that someone sent me that's a little bit heavier, so I'm still working through the rules on that. I honestly wouldn't even count that anymore because I've now gotten like half of a test game in. And then I just had 2 games delivered this week that I haven't opened the boxes yet on, just because I've been playing so many other things. So I've got, I would say 2, but I don't know. Would you even count them if they just came in the mail this week? I think a game has to be on your shelf for a couple of weeks before it's counted in your shelf of shame.
I think there is some longevity that it has to become like, a little bit, that first layer of dust or maybe a couple layers of dust, and then it becomes shameful.
Exactly.
And Adam, I think there is a lot of clout to what you're saying, but I also think it depends on the person, right? It depends on the game player themselves. I think if Tim has it in the house for 48 hours and hasn't been played, at that point, it's totally shameful, right?
Fair enough, yeah.
Good point.
Hey, so here's my question. So Adam, clearly you have a lot to be ashamed about. What is it?
We're talking just board games, right?
So, but for real, what is it that causes this situation that you find yourself in? Is it that your eyes are bigger than your game playing time, or that you just see games that seem like they're going to be great and then you buy them and you're like, man, maybe not so much, or you just can't find the right crew to play them with? So how does this happen?
Well, I think this is a lot of it spawns from my kind of buying splurge. Maybe started 2 years ago. I went a little nuts on Kickstarter and got some of these games in. And by the time they got here, my gaming taste had already changed. Like, I didn't care about these weird games that had got in. Since I've been gaming more and more and more, and the year that they were getting manufactured and on the boats or stuck in the Suez Canal or wherever else, my gaming taste just totally changed. So they're sitting here and I try to move them on if I can. I have some of them that I keep because maybe someday I'll want to play it. Or I hear that these games are good, but maybe they're like 10 to 15 years old and no one's interested in playing them. Antica 2 is one that the guys on So Very Wrong About Games are always talking about. It's an area control, super quick, snappy with a little rondelle, and it's supposed to be rad. So I was like, man, these guys love it. It's got to be a great game. But you open it up and it's got the, the cards with borders that Tim hates, and it's just probably a really good game that not that many people care about, at least in my gaming circles. So it's been sitting there, and that's kind of the games that are on my shelf of shame.
So it sounds like Kickstarter is the culprit here, really.
Potentially, and just my sloppy spending habits, also a contributor.
We're going to be covering our top 5 incoming Kickstarter games in a couple weeks, but also we're going to be looking at a scorecard from last year's top 5 incoming Kickstarter games. And I think we're going to be talking a lot about Kickstarter and what kind of culprit it is. So we'll get to that soon. But let me give you the results of our poll respondents, the people that responded on Twitter. 9% said shameless. This is out of 66 votes. So around 7 or 8 people had 0 games on their shelf of shame. Guys, this is pretty pathetic. We got too many games sitting there collecting dust, not being used. 38%, the biggest respondent said 1 to 5. That's not too bad. Okay, you got a couple of games that you just haven't gotten to. You don't have the right group for. I'm okay with that. 23%, 6 to 10 games. This is where it gets really bad. 30% of the people had 10 or more games that are on their shelf of shame. People that are following and listening and responding on Twitter, that's how they responded. It seems like they kind of match up with our group. We got a 0, a 1 to 5, a 6 to 10, and a 10 plus. We're right in that same group.
We're an American family.
Jeff Milton said there's no shame in waiting for the right opportunity to play a game. So
I like that.
Agreed on that. Sometimes you buy a game with the intent of playing with the right group, a bigger group of people, somebody that you're waiting to see. That's cool. Makes sense. And one of the other respondents, Jave Rolf, said you're in denial to Jeff. So probably true.
Who was it said, let's call it a shelf of potential and not a shelf of shame? Because that guy needs some high fives.
Yeah, I think Jeff, I think that was in Jeff's comments as well. So yeah, it seems like that's kind of everybody wants to get these games played, but can't always do it. All right, well, let's get into a description of Rococo. In Rococo, you play as dressmakers trying to gain as much prestige as possible by having your fashions make an appearance at the court of Louis XV and by providing the decorations for the upcoming ball. Each player has a deck of 5 employee cards at the start of the game. You'll start each round by choosing 3 of the cards in your deck and adding it to your hand. If you don't have enough cards left in your draw pile to draw to 3, then you'll put your discard pile face down as a draw pile and choose enough to fill up to 3 cards. Each turn will consist of using one of those employees to take one of 6 standard actions. And when you do, you'll also gain the bonus action, if any, printed on the employee card. Employees have one of 3 skill levels: Masters, Journeyman, or Apprentice, and some actions can only be taken by higher skill levels. The first action you can take is getting the Favor of the Queen, which gives you 5 coins and allows you to be the first player in the next round. If you take this action in the final round, you will also get 3 victory points at the end of the game. This action cannot be taken with an Apprentice employee card. The second action you can take is to acquire resources. This allows you to pay for one of the face-up resource tiles in the warehouse region of the central board, and either keep the tile for the silk resources printed on it, or discard it immediately to gain either the yarn or lace resources printed on it. When there are 3 or 4 resource tiles in a row of the warehouse, they cost 2 coins, but if there's only 2 remaining, then the cost is 1 coin, or no coins if there's only 1 remaining. So the cost gets lower as the best tiles are taken. This action can be taken by any type of employee card. The third action you can take is to make a dress. To do this, you must discard the matching silk, yarn, or lace resources that are printed on one of the dress patterns available in a face-up supply on the central board. The pattern market has a cost over each pattern, with the patterns to the far left costing nothing, and the patterns increasing in cost to the right. If the dress you are making has a coin cost, then you must pay the coin cost at the same time. Once you've made a dress, you can either sell the dress for the coin amount printed on the related tile, or you can rent the dress out by flipping it over and placing the related patron tile in one of the open guest spaces in one of the halls for the ball. The main board is split into 4 levels and 5 rooms. Some of the open guest spaces in these rooms have a bonus coin or resource icon printed on them, so when your guest covers that space, you immediately get the bonus. Some of the spaces also show the master icon and can only be used if a master employee was used to make that dress. Each of the rooms also has a majority bonus that will give you additional points at the end of the game if you have the most or second most dresses in that room. This action cannot be taken by an apprentice employee, and some of the dresses can only be made by a master employee. The fourth action you can take is to hire a new employee from a set of 4 face-up employee cards. There is a money cost to take them that gets smaller as fewer employees are available through the course of the round. Each employee card has a unique bonus action printed on it, and the available employees become more powerful as the game progresses. When you hire an employee, you add it to your hand, and that will provide you with an additional employee to use for actions during that round. This action can only be taken by a master employee. The fifth action allows you to depute the employee that you are playing, which allows you to take its bonus action, get coins as indicated on the bottom of that card, and then remove it permanently from your deck. The sixth and final standard action is to fund a decoration. There are a number of decoration spaces printed on the board throughout the ballrooms that have a coin cost, and then most provide an endgame scoring bonus or some additional ongoing effect like additional coin income at the end of the round. These decorations are presented in the art as statues, fountains, musicians, and fireworks. This action can be taken by any employee. After players have used all of their employee cards and can no longer take any actions, the round ends. Players receive a base income of 5 coins as well as income provided by their decorations on the fountain. Each player then draws back up to 3 cards. The employee, dress, and resource markets are refilled, and the player that took the Queen's Favor action in the previous round becomes starting player. The game is played over 7 rounds. At the end of the 7th round, points are added for leftover coins, point bonuses on employee cards, points on decorations, points on rented dresses, majority bonuses in the rooms, and then any players that have funded a firework decoration on the terrace level can move their guests that are on the top floor up to the terrace and get additional scoring on those dresses. The player with the most points is the winner. Rococo was designed by Matthias Kramer, Louis Malz, and Steven Malz, and is currently published in the United States as a deluxe version by Eagle Griffin Games with art by Ian O'Toole. Let's get into the gameplay and mechanisms of Rococo. So, Adam, let's start with you. First of all, coming into Rococo, I told you about the theme of this game. What do you think? Were you excited to get in and play this one?
Well, I would say hell no. I was not excited, but you convinced me with Obsession. I really, really enjoy that game. So what could go wrong with a game about being a dressmaker or a coat maker and trying to throw the biggest... Well, I don't know what we're trying to do here. I don't even know what we're trying to do, but you're making dresses, right? Dresses and coats. And it was so fun. You could get into it. You're buying silk and you're buying thread, you're buying lace. And what's the other thing? Is it thread? I don't even know.
Thread.
Yeah. Thread and lace, right?
So those are some of the wacky resources. The theme was pretty rad. It's better than Mediterranean fish and wheat and wine and trading those around for victory points. I had a good time here with the theme, even though we're not talking about that.
Chris, any mechanisms that stood out for you that you liked in this game?
Yeah, but first a question for you, Tim. So I'm really curious. I want to get inside your head on this. What attracted you to this game? Was it the mechanisms or was it the theme?
I didn't know much about the mechanisms, to be honest. I had just a very vague understanding of them, and it was mostly that it was a unique theme.
Okay.
It really, like, several years ago, this came across my radar as I was really getting into the hobby and starting to kind of catch up on board game podcasts and reviews. And a couple people mentioned this, and it was just like, this seems different. It seems interesting. It was the theme that really caught my attention and made me want to play it.
Oh, that's interesting. I actually was one of the folks like Adam who was a little bit skeptical about the game when you first told us about it. But, I've been surprised before. Obsession is an obvious example of that. And so I watched a rules video and I thought this actually looks pretty cool. And there's a few things about it. I don't know that there was any particular mechanism that made me go, wow, this is so incredibly unique. But there was a bunch of things that worked well together. There was some deck building, some ability to, clear out your deck. One of the things that I actually liked a great deal was that there's a couple of different tracks that you can go down. One of which is making dresses. We called it building dresses because it sounded funny, but making dresses and putting people into the ball with them. That's one way you can score a lot of points. But another way you can score a lot of points is to decorate the party. And Adam actually killed it on that because he got a character who allowed him to have some pretty deep discounts, the dollar store general discounts on his decorations. And so they were easy to throw out. And there were some decorations that were just straight points. There were some decorations that allowed you to maximize other scoring. But there were a few different things, all highly thematic, that allowed you to diversify how you were going to get your scoring or to try a bunch of different things and score in a bunch of different ways. And I thought it worked well in the aggregate, even though I don't recall there being any specific mechanism that just blew me away individually.
Jen, how about you? Anything that stood out to you?
For me, it was the fourth round realization that this was a deck building game, right? And so I was learning it as we went. I had half paid attention to a really short video in order to learn it. And once we started playing, I realized that I had to stop for a second and say, really, guys, I don't have a clue what's going on. We have to slow down, talk me through your first turn. And then I got most of the mechanics of it at that point in time. But my brain turned off to the deck building aspect of it. And I just was like, okay, I'll learn that piece later. I'll learn the employee drafting because you have a choice, right? It's really simple. You get to select your cards and you get to perform a task based on those cards. And for the first 4 rounds, I had the same exact cards to utilize. And I was going nowhere and watching y'all zip all over the board until I realized, when I have that one gold character that can do anything that they want to, any gold thimbles, I need to go up there and I need to draft a new employee because I'm basically sitting here with employees that have been in their jobs for 24 years and they're not going anywhere, right? They're just all doing the exact same thing. And so when I hit that point around the 4.5 round, then it felt like the game got a little more exciting. And so I ended up taking the first player token and figured out that again it was a big deal because it allowed me to take the first employee then. And then the game got spicy and that was exciting. And I got 2 really good employees in those 2 rounds and it made it so much more fun and diverse. And literally that realization probably allowed me to catch up in those last couple rounds as fast as I did. But the early rounds of me just kind of fudging around and keeping my money in my pocket also helped me exponentially in that. So I guess there's lots of routes to victory in this one.
Jen, you touched on it here. The novel part for me was kind of the deck building and the hand management. Everybody starts with the same, I think it's 5 or 6 cards. So from that first 5 cards, first of all, you're picking 3 of those, and those are just in your hand right away, and you discard those, and you know which 2 are coming up next. And from those 3 you discarded that first round, you just look at them, and you pick which one you want. It's that simple. There's no like shuffling or, it's not a random draw. You have a lot more options with what you get to look at and what you know is coming and what you know is in your draw pile. So that to me was kind of a novel mechanism for this game. What about you, Tim? What do you think stood out for your mechanism was?
I'm going to start by just talking about what you guys are saying about the employee cards. And that is that this reminds me of a couple games I really love right now. Underwater Cities, Dune Imperium, and even last week, Cascadia. And that is that basically on your turn, you get to do 2 things. And it's a combination of two things. So your starting deck has 5 different characters in it, I think, or 6 characters. 4 of the characters have an ability on them. And so when you take an action, you play one of those employees, you get the unique ability that that employee has, but you also get to take one of the other basic actions on the board. So it's never about just making one decision that I'm doing on my turn. It's about a mix of 2 decisions, typically. I really like that about this mechanism. Now, when we started, the starting deck, as Jen mentioned, you could do some fun things even with that starting deck. 4 of the 6 characters were unique. They each did something that was helpful and gave you a benefit. The rest of the employees you could recruit over the course of the game. The benefits seemed to get wackier and wackier and more powerful as the game grew. And so it was super fun to add some of those through the game, and then everybody kind of had a completely different driving strategy they could do because of that. So I thought that mechanism, that part of the way that the deck worked and how that worked with your general actions was really fun.
Tim, I have a clarifying question for that I didn't quite catch on the setup. Were they in a specific order that they came out?
Yeah, kind of in a way they are. So there's I think 4 different stacks of or 5 different stacks of 6 cards or something like that. And so you don't see the same 4 in round 1, but you might see 4 of the normal, first 6 in round 1, and then you'd see the next 2 plus 2 random ones from the next set in the next round. So my understanding on the setup is that it's going to vary a little bit, but you're going to see the same cards over the course of the game. But depending on which round, they might come up a round or 2 later
Different order, yeah.
than you see them today. So they're going to come up in a slightly different order.
Yeah, it's neat the way the deck is seated. There's 6 level 6 cards, and then there's 4 level 5 cards, and you kind of shuffle them up, and you don't know exactly which order they're coming out, Tim, just like you were saying. So they're kind of going to come out, the stronger ones are going to come out later, but you're not sure exactly when.
I do want to say that there's one part of that, in the first play, it was fantastic. It was really fun to see what cards came up and see those unique abilities and add them to your deck. I think that it's unfortunate that there isn't cards that you wouldn't see in a game. In other words, you're always going to see the same 28 cards every single game. And so that's unfortunate. It might get a little bit stale over time, although they are very varied and unique abilities. And depending on the strategy you're going for, maybe that's going to stay fun. But I would have liked to see a few more cards that you just don't get to see every game.
I'd be curious to see if, like other games we play, there are some games, every single time you play it a little bit different. But I think some games that we revert back to, we do tend to get a strategy that feels the most comfortable for us. So I wonder if having those static 28 cards would lead to that, because I know, for instance, the 2 employees, I can count the 2 because I had so few compared to the 3 of you. I know the 2 I had were super powerful, right? I had one that allowed me to turn 3 coins into a victory point. And at the end, I had so many coins, I was able to get 11 victory points out of that. And then I had another one, I can't even remember it off the top of my head.
Yeah, it let you buy a decoration at a discount of 10 coins, which was huge.
It was an even bigger discount than Adam. Adam, who had bought up half the board in decorations, then I had twice the discount that he did, but it wasn't until later in the game. Those 2 felt so incredibly powerful to me that I can see myself coming back into it and being like, oh my gosh, one of those 2 going to pop up. I want to watch for them and see if I'm going to get them. Because it felt so good in my brain when I got to utilize those. So I'm curious if, you had one that really made you excited about the game, or if it was just kind of you had drafted so many, it didn't really affect your overall mental well-being for the game.
First of all, Jen, did those super powerful cards get you the win on this one?
Yeah, that second place victory was stellar.
No, I definitely, I had a couple of cards that I loved seeing pop up in the deck. And that's another interesting thing about the deck building here is that it's really strange because you can you look at your whole face down deck at the beginning of the round and pick 3 of the cards out of it. So you're not just randomly drawn off the top of the deck. But then those 3 cards that you've chosen for that round, you won't see the next round because you're just going to get whatever's in the deck the next time. So there still is an interesting value, a little bit of a value of culling some of the cards. And there's some ways to do that in this game as well. I didn't even end up doing it, but I could see how you could get a more streamlined, focus on a couple specific cards and really hone in on a strategy and some cards that combo together. And Adam, you happen to have a couple of cards that comboed well together. So
yeah, and we keep letting Chris not jump in here. Sorry, Chris. But I was down to 5 or 6 cards at one point. So, I play 3 cards and then I know which 2 are coming up next. And of the 3 cards I just played, I got to just pick one of those ones right back in my hand and combo them up nicely. So that was kind of neat having less than 6 cards or less. It gave you a lot of options and a lot of ease of what you wanted to combo together. Of Chris, what are you going to say?
Well, it's interesting that, I mean, obviously the deck building aspect of this game is the thing that really caught pretty much all of our attention. And a couple things that did strike me as a little bit unique about the deck building aspect of this. One, we had already talked about a bit, which is the fact that the cards are seeded, so the better cards come later, which is not an entirely, unheard of mechanism. Of course, Blood Rage is a good example of that, but that's not a deck building game. In this one, the deck building happens with the more powerful cards at the end. The other thing, and maybe these sort of go hand in hand with each other, is that there weren't a lot of cards that were true garbage. I mean, I love deck building games, and Star Realms, for example, once I get past a round or so, I'll be happy if I never see that $1 card again. But in this game, there were cards I was reluctant to get rid of from my starter hand because they had uses for them. And in fact, for me, I was trying to build up my hand because one of the bonus cards that I had, one of my employees gave me points for the size of my hand, gave me dollars for the size of my hand. And so it actually behooved me to keep as many people in my hand as I could, because then I was racking up. I think it got as high as, if you had a standard hand of 5 to 6 people, then you got $1 every time you played him. But if you had up to 11 people, I think like $7 every time you played that character. So that's pretty powerful, especially if you got it relatively early on in the game.
Yeah, I agree. And I thought that was great that your starting cards all were invaluable. I mean, yeah, you could scrap them later and probably find some alternatives to do it. But even like the apprentices, that the one just gives you an extra market, thing, and one just lets you convert $1 into one of the types of resources. I just was like so reliant on those throughout the game that it was fun to have those guys come up, even though they were just starting cards.
Yeah.
I want to jump off the deck building a little bit because we've been talking about that for a little while. And just one thing, this is a pretty traditional exchange resources for another good. There's a lot of different things going on here, but that's one of the key mechanisms, right? You got to collect one of the types of silk, and you got to collect these other two resources, lace and thread, and then trade it in for dresses. I really like the market. How do you get the resources? There's this market of 16 face-up tiles in 3 different rows. And when you go to collect something from the market, you pick one of the tiles, but you pay based on how many tiles are left in that row. So one, it created a fun little economy. Like if there was a stronger tile in that row, of course, you're going to pick that one first, pay $2 for it. But once a couple tiles are out of that row, the resources get cheaper. So the ones that don't seem as valuable, all of a sudden they're less expensive and someone can just grab them up. So it's a fun little economy there. The other thing I really like though is that when you pick a tile out of that selection, you can either keep it for the silk, which can be traded in to use as a dress, or you can immediately convert it into the thread or lace resources. And just having those variable resource options, I thought that was fun. It was kind of a unique way to go about resource gathering and resource management. So I had fun with that.
The markets were great here. Not only was there the warehouse where you could do the silk and the thread and the lace, but you also had the workshop, the bottom row, where you had the different dresses that you could make. And that was kind of a market too. The ones on the right were the cheaper ones, and the new ones that came out, the hot new flavor this season, went to the left, a little more expensive. So if you wanted to buy that, depending on what resources you had, you could work that in, and those would kind of refresh and shuffle along every round. And then the same with the employees over on the left side. Those would refresh every round too. And it came down to a point of which one do you want to go for first? What's the most important to you? Because they were all so good. So I found myself a lot of times being like, oh man, do I need to get this card first, or do I go for the dress so I get the space? So the market here was really neat and just interconnected with everything.
And it was kind of cool how the market was set up so that for pretty much every resource, whether it was the dressmaking resources or the employees that you could hire or the dresses that were available, basically the longer you waited, the cheaper they got for you. So you hope nobody would snatch it out from underneath you, but if you could make it through a round or two or a turn or two without those things going away, you could really score some bargains.
There was one other element here that I thought was pretty cool, is that when you trade in those resources for a good, in this case making dresses or coats, but then you convert that into not only points, but also it turns into an area majority game. What do you guys think of that? Did that work for you?
I love that extra little piece of player interaction in a Euro game. That's what kind of put this game, over a little threshold from a lot of other Euro games for me. There's that little race, that little challenge, especially with 4 people. It's a mess of people going for majorities in there. I thought that was really cool. I also liked how, it wasn't just first floor, second, they had on the third floor, I guess it is. Let me see, hall 2 and hall 3 is what they're called. It was divided into 2 floors. So you have these little smaller rooms as opposed to these, I don't know how many slots are in these other halls, but they're all larger.
Like 7 or 8 in the other halls, and then like 4 or 5 in those halls.
And the other 2 were smaller. So you had these little ones you can go for quicker, of course, worth less points. So you had some interesting decisions to make in the area majority. I thought that was really nice.
And I also like that when you went to choose which space you were going to take in that hall, a couple of them had resource bonuses. So placing in a hall, you could get a couple choices. Maybe get some extra gold coins for doing that, or an extra, thread resource. Or if you used your master craftsman or whatever he was, the gold thimble guy, then you could put him on a space that other people couldn't get to. So there's some really fun decisions about, hey, I'm the first one to go in this room. Which one do I take? Also, how am I going to retain control? Do I save the thimble spaces for later on when hopefully nobody else has that guy available and can take it? So definitely very interesting choices. Every time I built a dress, it was fun. It was fun to decide where to put him.
I hear you saying that not only in this board game, but just in real life, Timmy. So, and along with that, what did you guys think of the terrace mechanic? I wasn't involved in that. It was all Tim and Chris. So, Chris, what did you think of that terrace, the fireworks area?
Considering it was the only place that I actually scored any points, I loved it. I thought it was great. No, that's a neat mechanism here, because you have this building where the party is set, the palace, and you can put people in the party in your dresses all the way up to the top floor. And then above that, there's a terrace where the fireworks happen at the end of the night. But you can't put anybody up there. What you can do, essentially, is put your folks in the top floor and then reserve a spot at the terrace. So basically, it's like Disneyland. They're making sure they charge extra to get you the good seats where you can see the fireworks at the end of the night. And so if you have characters on the top floor, then you can move them up if you've reserved a space for them, which lets you add a multiplier, which is awesome. And especially if you've got a couple of 4-point dresses in there, that can be a real game changer for you. But I thought that was really neat. It was an interesting planning exercise. Thankfully, that was the one place where I actually did manage to I would say is outmaneuvering Tim, because I think he was just maneuvering to get more points in other areas, but where I actually managed to get a big chunk of points.
And watching it, there was this huge FOMO for me. I was complete fear of missing out at that point when I watched you and Tim taking over that level. And so the only thing that did make me feel a little bit better was when, there was the little debacle and Adam didn't end up getting a place up there either. And I was like, all right, good. As long as I'm not alone in the fact that I'm not the only one at the end of the night that doesn't get to watch the fireworks. So
what I liked about it too, though, is when I read the rules and then we were kind of halfway through the game and I was worried, people that didn't get on that top floor, you guys kind of missed out on it. And I was like, oh my God, you won't have a chance here. I was afraid that those multipliers from the fireworks and the ability to get the majorities on the decorations on the top, up on the terrace was just going to essentially push us over the top. But that's not even what happened. Chris clearly scored the most out of the fireworks. He got the most dresses up there. He got multipliers on 3 of them, and he ended up just barely in last place. The second, third, and fourth place were all within 2 points, and you guys, Adam and Jen, didn't even have anybody on the top floor or on the terrace at all. So I was glad to see that did balance out better than just people rushing up to the top floor and rushing to get those decorations, and that's the only way you win the game. That's clearly not the case here. So that was good to see. It seemed like very balanced, a lot of different ways to get points, and they all were valid strategies.
And just for the record, since you say just barely in last place, there's no limit to how few points you can score and still be in last place. Just
So in this game, there's almost no victory points that were awarded before the end of the game. Very few opportunities to actually get points. So it was so much, again, I like the banter and the camaraderie through it. Someone was always in the lead because they had 1 point or 2 points. And I got a kick out of that little conversation back and forth. But I'm curious, how do you feel about that game mechanism when there is not a point track that's going on during the game and you just kind of have to have your eyes on the board? What do you think about that? Chris and I haven't gotten to dialogue on a lot on the podcast. This is our first one that we're really doing about a game. So I'm actually going to ask you that question, if that's okay, Chris.
What I just heard was Jen said, Tim, stay out of this. I want to talk to Chris about this. Got it.
Oh man, we just talked about this last week on Cascadia, and it was so funny because I don't like the games where I have to be spending so much time paying attention to what everybody else is doing that I can't focus on what I'm doing. Or I feel like I'm being, negligent because I'm not, watching, tracking every point that Tim or Adam is generating in the course of a game. So I love it when a game lets you kind of back off into your own spot and be, kind of work on your own stuff for a little bit, which is pretty ironic considering I really like area control games. But we talked about this last week in Cascadia, where you had it was a little bit too open world to actually be able to mess around with people, and you didn't have to pay as much attention to what they were doing, as opposed to Calico, which is sort of its sister game, where you can completely screw with somebody and you really have to keep track of what everybody is doing. This one, I felt like there were places where you needed to keep track of what was happening. So, for example, the area control in the different floors, you really needed to keep track of what was going on there because you really didn't stand a chance of ever getting any area control in there if you didn't. And I'll talk more about this in the moments of the game, but that's where my big moments are because of my lack of situational awareness, or at least my lack of being able to control things. But I thought this game was a reasonably good balance between really kind of focusing on your own stuff and at least keeping some, one eye on what was happening on the rest of the board. What about you, Jen? Same question.
For me, when the points come out of nowhere, I think since the game was so brand new, every mechanism specifically inside of this world, inside of this game was brand new. I had no idea how it was going to pan out. At one point we predicted, the points will probably be in the 30s or 40s. And our points were between like 54 and 79 between last place and first place. So not at all what we expected. And so I think some of the power of our actions was probably overestimated, I guess, based on that math. And so I think that at the end, there's like that a little bit of a fun to it. But I think over time, I don't know, I kind of like to know where I'm at in the game. The progress for me is fun, and the back and forth and knowing if I'm making good choices. And so the surprise aspect of, look who won, kind of came out of nowhere.
Can I jump in now?
Nope.
No.
Thank you. Adam.
I'll jump in here. I think there's pros and cons of a score. I think there's pros and cons of a score tracker. In some games, let's take Terraforming Mars, for instance. You see that person is up there at like 50 TR rating and you're down at like 27. And you know that you're just getting slaughtered and you know you probably don't have a chance if that's the case. So in a game like that, it can be good or bad. If it's neck and neck, if you guys are like 46 to 45 and there's only a few more turns left before the planet's terraformed or whatever, I'm looking at Terraforming Mars, then it's cool. So you can know if you're close and it's a tight game and you can add that tension, or it can be disappointing if you're just getting slaughtered. Here, I felt it worked pretty well because I felt like I was in it until the end of the game. And I was like, haha, I got 55 points. I think I did pretty good. Tim has 79 points. I just got wasted. So that was kind of a fun reveal for me. I think it has pros and cons, and depending on what you're looking for, it can go either way.
Yeah, I agree.
Tim.
I agree with Adam's point on this, and that it is nice when a game some games will reveal to you early that you don't have a chance at winning. And that's just sad. It's not fun to play a game when you know you can't win. And so having the hidden score is nice. But I think in this game, it actually served a really important purpose. And that is that it stopped kingmaking. Because in this case, like in the last couple rounds, where you place that dress could make or break somebody's last couple points. And if you were watching every point throughout the course of the game and you knew that one person was 3 points above you and one person was 1 point above you, then that decision is going to come down to, okay, well, I just have to mess with this person instead of just going with my gut and saying, I really want to take the majority in this room. I really want to get this bonus for my thing. So I think it makes the game more fun in this case because, otherwise you're just min-maxing the last decision and you're deciding, do I want to stop Adam or do I want to stop Chris? So I think it's important in this game for those reasons. But in general, Jen, I agree with you. Like some games, it kind of stinks to not have a sense for how you're progressing. But it does also stop you from feeling bad when you just don't have a chance at winning or making somebody feel like they're out of the game. So,
and I would say that I lose so often that it's kind of like a very muted feeling in my body. I'm just used to the losing feeling, and now I just get excited about the gameplay. So.
Yeah, I love it when a game lets me have the illusion that I'm actually standing a chance, only to find out at the end that really I was like in a distant last place. That's a great feature.
So let's jump into the production and theme of the game. Now, I want to make it really clear here, first of all, that we played a version of the game from 2013, the original production of Rococo. And this game is no longer in print. So when we're talking about the production, just keep that in mind. We're not going to go too deep on the artwork here. Eagle Griffin with Ian O'Toole doing the art just released a brand new version of this. I think it was sent to Kickstarter backers this year or last year, but it's out there now. If you buy a new version of this game, you're going to have a completely different production than what we saw. I want to focus a little more on the theme and maybe kind of the way the production worked and impacted the gameplay, and a little bit less on the specific look and feel of the version we played, because that's not really what most of our listeners are going to be playing with. So coming from that direction, Jen, was there anything on the production that stood out to you, or kind of the theme and the feel of the game that you appreciated?
The theme allowed for fun storytelling, to one another and the conversation. And so I think that's what it comes down to for me, and how much I got from it interacting with the three of you online was that, I'm going to go, I love, the things we say, like Adam's like, I'm going to go dress now, right? Like I'm going to go, like it's a verb, right? Or I'm going to go do this, or I'm going to kick this guy to the curb, or whatever it was. The theme was fun. We were hiring, we were firing, we were, selling, we were looking for discounts. I liked everything about that. I thought that was really, really great. And what was neat is I have to give kudos to Chris, who will at some point talk about the themed cocktail. But in the process of that, he did a little bit of research about the time period and was able to give us a little history lesson along the way. So I learned a little bit tonight. How much of it is accurate, I don't actually know. I'm not sure how much to trust the guy when it comes to that, especially considering he learned that stuff while researching a cocktail. But it was fun nonetheless.
I want to jump in with just one thing on the production that I like, and I think this carries through both with the version we played as well as the more modern, updated version, and that is that when you're putting your workers, when you're filling those dress orders and you're renting out your dresses to the people that are going to go to the balls, I love when the mechanisms impact the board game to kind of create a story. So basically there's slots up on these ballrooms, like the main board just looks like several different floors of a big estate mansion. And on each floor is this intricate ballrooms with musicians there and all of this stuff. And so when you put one of your dresses and rent it to somebody, then you put the guest up in that floor, and you've now, changed the look and feel of the board in a very thematic way. You're filling in the board, you're kind of painting a picture as it's going. And that is always great to me when a production can pull that off without negatively impacting the mechanism. So I think Rococo does a great job here.
Man, I just have so many kind of snarky things I want to say about, the amazing things you can do with cardboard. You can use it to make a box. You can use it to fill a box full of pieces of cardboard. But in reality, I actually did enjoy the production of this game. The board is actually very nice looking, and it really does put you in a sense of place. You feel like you're at the party. The people start filling up the party, and it's kind of exciting and fun, and it looks festive. I mean, what can I say? That's kind of what theme is all about, right? Making you feel in the mood of the scenario that you find yourself in. And I thought this production actually did that pretty well. The one complaint that I had was in the card deck, there was really only, I think, 3 bits of art. There were 3 types of characters. There were your masters, there were your I forget what they called them, interns, I called them, and there were the journeymen, kind of the mid-range folks. And there was 1 picture for each of those people, and that was okay. I mean, it was decent enough art, but I really would have enjoyed it if they had several different masters or several different journeymen or several different interns, because I think that just would have made it more fun. I've got my master, you've got your master, dressmaker, and I think that would add to the enjoyment of the game. Not a huge downside, but it was a little bit of a bummer for me.
Yeah, and Chris, I will mention, I'm looking at the artwork on the new upgraded version of it, and it does look like the cards all have different people on them. So it is not just the 3 different pictures, as far as I can tell. I'm not sure how unique they are, how many different unique pictures there, but it does look more unique.
Right. Well, that's nice.
On that note, Tim, I was going to say, if you are interested in this older version, do yourself a favor and don't look at this new version, because the new version is gorgeous. Oh my God. I was going to say nice things about this old production. No, it looks like garbage compared to this new. This new production is amazing. It has the Ian O'Toole makeover, and the player boards are fantastic. Anyway, Wow, new production, fantastic. The old production's fine. It's what you would expect from a
2013, yeah, 2013, I think.
Yeah, that era of board game. Art's fine. There's a lot of browns. It's not very vibrant. It's fine. The cards have borders, which is some of Tim's favorites.
Did you notice it was ahead of its time, though? It didn't have white borders on the cards. It actually had colored borders.
It did. On the cards. You're right.
Pretty impressive. And I want to say too, like, and I think this is true of the old version as well as the new version, is that the user experience, the graphic design on the board, how you interact with the board, how you use your characters, that was all really clean and straightforward. But in both cases, I think they rely a little bit too much on iconography for all the unique character cards, where I understand there's some more cost in doing language specific versions, but this would have made it a lot easier to just have a line of text on each of the employee cards. It just tells you what they do. Now, we got through the deck, and I think next time we played, we would all know exactly what all those icons mean. So maybe it wasn't that big of a deal, but it was a little frustrating this first time that every time a new row came up, we had to go digging through the rule book and look up each of the employees. So I think they could have fixed that with just a little bit of language on there, but that's my only complaint there.
It looks like on this new version, they do have a point tracker.
Oh.
Not on the old version.
Yeah. And I'm looking at the art that Adam mentioned, and man, what a difference. What a difference.
Right.
The people, like, one of the things that struck me as kind of strange about this production was the people all stand there like, department store they're wearing the dresses, but they're all kind of in this one stock pose. This one's got people, one dude's lounging, one dude's kind of, standing there in his, kind of cool guy stance. And, it really, the people look like people at a party. And I think that's really cool.
Yeah, agreed. All right. Well, let's jump into memorable moments of the game. Chris, I think you mentioned you have something you want to talk about here.
Yeah. As with so many moments of the game for me, it was moments of disappointment. And it was the area control. There was the two top floors. Actually, no, I forget which floors they were. One of them was the top floor. And you and I were battling it out for that one. Jen and I were battling it out for the other floor, which I can't remember which one it was. But those are the two highest scoring floors. And I thought that I was just killing it. And in particular, that was because I had a character who allowed me to make two dresses at a time. So I'm like, bam, take that. I'm putting two dresses out on this floor. Your history. And then both of you managed to push me back and get me to, and actually that's Jen and I ended up sharing the points for it, and you ended up winning on a tiebreaker because you had more masterfully made dresses on that floor. Oh, and it was just so heartbreaking. I so wanted those points. I worked so hard for them, but in the end, your dresses were more popular, Tim. What can I say? What about you?
I had a number of memorable moments, but one of them is just going to highlight that this is a Euro. It's resource gathering, but there is a lot of player interaction here. We already talked about some of the, the area majority, which Chris just mentioned here, but we were coming into the last round of the game. I set up my 3 employees to take exactly the actions I wanted to take. And I had the materials I needed to get a specific garment, and I was going to be able to do a couple things in an order that would have gotten me not only a dress, got an area majority on a floor, as well as got another firework decoration, which would have been awesome for me. And I'm looking at everyone else's materials that they have. And I know that Adam's got 15 materials. Somehow he's got a collection of silk. And I was like, there's no way he wants this rinky dink little dress that I'm trying to buy. The one action I need to do to put a dress on the top floor. And Adam blows 6 materials to pick up this rinky dink dress. And it's because he knows that it's the only one I can buy. So he literally looked at the supplies I had available. He didn't care what dress he took. He just wanted to stop me from getting it. He wanted to fill in, he just needed a dress, but he could have gotten anything in the whole supply. And I really didn't think I was going to take that one. And he did it. Oh man, I was so angry, but it was a good move. It was smart. And, clearly this is not a do your own thing game. This is you got to both do your thing, but you also got to watch what everyone else is doing, get in their way, make sure they're not running away with the decorations, make sure they're not running away with the fireworks. Also, there was that the opportunity to basically get somebody in every room of the place and get first on that. So you had to watch to make sure somebody wasn't going to beat you to that. So there's a lot of things that you really had to pay attention to here for what was a relatively simple, traditional Euro type of game.
Yeah, to piggyback on that, Tim, the moment for me there was a couple moments. That one where I did see you had a red and green resource. I was like, well, I've got 6 yellows and a red and a green spread across 2 different tiles. Might as well just throw them all in there and buy the stress so that Tim can't buy anything. That was great. The other moment of me, which is kind of a bonehead move by me, I thought it was going to get in on that top floor so I could get up to the terrace later on in the game and watch the fireworks show. Boom, bought the dress, put it up there. I was ready to party. Oh, no, nope. I didn't have a golden thimble guy. I just had the silver thimble guy. Shame on me. I had to move that dress, put that somewhere else. So that was kind of a bummer. It goes to show you this game, there's a few pivotal moments that would have, I don't know how big of a swing that would have been. Probably not too big, but it would have minimized that difference between Tim's, what ended up being a large in-game lead, and my middle of the pack finish there. So just the player interaction here overall in general was fantastic for me. What about you, Jen?
Quickly before Jen jumps in here, one thing that I want to jump back to, because we didn't mention in the mechanisms, and that's that thimble thing where, you know, some of your employees can do certain actions that others can't do depending on their master level. And this is just one of those things where, like, this is relatively simple mechanism set, but there are those kind of layers that it adds in to just make the decisions a little bit more interesting, a little bit more challenging, that you can only do certain actions with certain types of employees. And I really like that. It didn't complicate the game a lot, but it did put some restrictions in that, you know, made you have to kind of think, like, what employees do I want to leave for the next round just so I can do this thing without blowing them all this round. So one more layer we didn't really talk about in mechanisms, but since you mentioned that, I wanted to just jump on that. All right, Jen, sorry about that. Go ahead.
The moments that stood out to me were for me, the fun banter and the player interaction when we started talking about what was going on, and the fact that, you know, Adam had a discount and his was like, you know, he was buying decorations for the ball, not from Nordstrom, which is where they wanted us to buy the decorations, or maybe to hire like a private decorator, like an actual party planner, like, which is what I think the game, you know, the king himself probably wanted. And then, you know, we decided that, you know, Adam was probably getting them from Party City, and then I got a big old discount person, and that person was then going to be from the Dollar Tree. And I just get such a kick out of that. You know, a good Costco and Everdale is my kind of board game banter. I also really appreciated, I didn't know that I appreciated it, but that area, I don't even know what, I lost track of the word you were using, because for me it's the first time I've used that word.
The area majority?
Area majority. Thank you, Adam. I'm sure I've played a game. I'm sure if I asked him, hey, what kind of area majority games have I played? You could rack off like 10, but I've never really thought about it critically before, and I've never engaged in one, what we talked about on the podcast for sure. I kind of like that. I like that there wasn't a lot of resource control issues. We weren't going back and forth, but when I did end up getting to split the pot or take both of the 6 points with Chris on that floor, it felt like a good victory, right? Like I didn't realize it was going to happen or I was going to lose it, and I managed to keep a hold on that. And honestly, the 3 points, instead of having to take the backup 3 points, that's probably why I came in second and not third. That's how incredibly close, or fourth, that's how incredibly close this game was. So that player interaction in the area, what'd you call it again? One more time.
Area majority. Yeah.
Majority. For the cheap seats in the back.
I think the technical term is dresses on a map.
I like it.
So Jen, I have a question for you. As you said, a lot of these mechanisms were relatively, if not totally, new for you. What did you think with this slew of kind of deck building and hand management and area majority coming all at you at once? How was it for you?
I thought that was going to turn into like the point salad situation at the end. And we had talked about anticipating that could happen, but I didn't actually feel that way. I felt like once I got a grasp of the deck building thing that I missed at the beginning, the card drafting, however you want to call it, with new employees, that it was actually a game that I was able to grasp. Not as well as obviously I wanted to, but once I allowed my brain to pick up each piece, I was able to grasp the whole thing. So I enjoyed it.
Great. Yeah. I was just curious if you got, like sense of being overwhelmed. I think I got a sense of being overwhelmed, not really knowing where to start off and what to do and what direction to go in. I can see how it could be intimidating, not only for me who has, I don't want to brag, but a lot of experience deck building, but for someone who some of these mechanisms might be totally new for.
Yeah. I think that it's not a game to be intimidated by. I would say that I think by the second turn of the first round, I said, okay, I'm good. I can flip my cards over. I can keep them back to myself, and I'll muddle through this on my own and feel confident in it. And I think that is something that someone who enjoys a light to midweight Euro should know this game should not intimidate them. I think especially if you're playing with the pieces in your hand, this will be a really quick learn.
Yeah, agreed. All right, well, let's jump in and ask our final question, and that is, would you request to play this game again? So, Adam, why don't you start?
I really enjoyed this game a lot more than I thought I would. I think this game is going to fall into, if this was set up at somebody's house and they invited me over, heck yeah, I would dive right into this game and play it. But would I ever request to play it again? I don't think I would. But would I say no? No way. I would not say no. I would say yes. So with that confusing answer, I thoroughly enjoyed this game. I would play it again. I probably would not request to play it again.
This was a game that I mentioned a few weeks ago. This was my Grail game. It's a game I've been wanting to play for years. I've almost bought it several times. I almost bought, back the big deluxe version Kickstarter from a couple years ago because I've been really fascinated by the concept, by the theme of the game. I had a general understanding of the mechanism, seemed interesting enough, but I didn't really know them well. One thing is playing this game through, it comes from a time period when mechanisms are streamlined. There were some interesting things going on, a nice little mix of different things, but it was very streamlined, very straightforward. I don't even think you get games this streamlined anymore, not with this many components, not a Euro of this like type of production that is probably that easy to just jump into and start playing and explain. And so, that's great. It's something I think that it's a bygone era and I kind of miss it. On the same front though, I don't think it did enough interesting for me to say, I really want to go out and I want to buy this game, or I really want to play this over something else. I played a couple other, what would be considered midweight Euros this last week, Rajas of the Ganges and Teotihuacan, both games that I think definitely have roots from that era of Euro, but did a lot more things that were interesting and gave me more interesting decisions every turn. So this was a blast to play. It was easy to get into and start playing. And I think once you got to know it with a couple people who that area majority would even be more fun because you know what to fight for. You're not going to let somebody take a floor and get that majority. You're going to fight for the fireworks. You're going to fight for the decorations. So I think this game has a lot of fun going for it, but I don't think it's enough for me to say, I want to pick this over something else. So I had fun playing. I'm glad I finally got a chance to. And as Adam mentioned, I would never say no. If somebody was like, let's play Rococo, I'm like, yeah, that was a blast. But I don't think that I'm going to go out and buy the, deluxe updated version because I think it'd sit on my shelf and I'd constantly be picking something else that was a little bit more modern, a little fresher over it. And I can't say why exactly, but there is just something about it that's just a little bit too simplistic. Even though that's a good thing, it doesn't get me, it doesn't feel like there's enough depth to really draw me back into it too much. So Chris, what about you? How do you feel about Rococo?
Yeah, kind of, what you guys said. It's one that I would not ask to play again, but I would be perfectly happy to play again. And similar to what you said, Tim, it is probably because while there's plenty of good stuff happening in this game, nothing really kind of reached out and, grabbed me. If I wanted to play a Euro game, there's probably other games that we've already played that I'd like to play again, or new ones I'd like to try that I haven't tried before. And so, I don't see myself coming back and saying, yeah, I really want to revisit Rococo. I feel good about it, but not great.
I can't say it any other way. Ditto almost everything that all three of you said. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I'd play it if you wanted to play it. I don't need to put it on my shelf. It would end up on the shelf of shame.
I think that the only other game that we've ever reviewed like this, where everybody was positive about the mechanisms, that was, had a great time playing it, talked about fun moments of the game, and then everybody on the podcast said, no, I wouldn't request to play it again. And the only other game that we did that with, I think, was Concordia. It was Steve, Adam, and myself that played it. And that was from, I think, the same year. It was like the same era of game. And I think in that case, part of it was the production, which I don't think Rococo suffers from, especially the more modern version. But I think it is a little bit of that, yeah, this is a great, streamlined, smooth, classic feeling Euro, but it feels like we've kind of moved on past it a little bit. So it's funny that these games can still bring a lot of fun, but not really get you too excited.
It makes me wonder if someone who had a smaller library accessible to them, if they had played it the same way we had, they might be more excited about playing it again. I think so. I think there is a lot of joy to be had in this game.
Oh, for sure.
And I think it just comes almost from having too many options. And that's the only reason this one's going to fall down further on my list.
Nicely said.
If the theme does something for you here, I could see this being like a no-brainer as well. If you were really into this era, or dressmaking, coat making, and just the beauty of this new version is amazing. So if that did it for you, then this might be the game for you.
Yeah, right on.
Let me just add one thing to that, because this really goes to the power of theme. Because we all played Obsession, and we all played, or most of us played Obsession, and we all played Rococo. And I don't know that I could really draw any huge distinctions in terms of the depth of the mechanisms of the play, but there was something about the way those pieces were put together into a story in Obsession that would absolutely make me come back and play that one again, and even buy the game. That with this one, I just felt kind of neutral about.
Interesting, Chris. I wouldn't have pinpointed that, but that's interesting to hear you say, and I can see where you're coming from. We're going to wrap up our discussion on Rococo. We're going to jump into a themed cocktail. We're going to talk about what's been on our table, and we're going to give you some future takes right after this. All right, welcome back. So, Chris, what do you have for us? What kind of drinks are we drinking while we're making dresses in 17th century France?
Well, you guys are going to have to bear with me this week. There is a pretty strange stream of consciousness kind of path between Rococo and this week's drink. The main complication: nobody was drinking cocktails back in the mid to late 1700s. So if you think back to our Obsession episode, even by the Industrial Revolution in the late 1800s, the idea of mixed alcoholic drinks was really pretty novel. The sherry cobbler that we tried that week fell into this interesting realm of what I'll call proto-cocktails, and it was odd enough that Charles Dickens commented on their novelty after his first visit to America. So as you can probably guess, you go back another 100 years, and cocktails weren't even really the gleam in some tavern keeper's eye. So if you were at a Rococo style party, you would have been drinking wine without a doubt. So let's take a sidestep into some more general history. King Louis XV was a party boy, right? So I think it's fair to say that his reign is not universally viewed favorably, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that he was more interested in parties and palace intrigue than in actually governing France. In fact, his profligacy was, in general, lack of seriousness is often given at least some credit for the shortly to follow French Revolution, which we all know about, right? In fact, Marie Antoinette was even one of his homegirls. So that brings us back to the cocktail. The French 75 is a cocktail that's not only a classic, but when you're sipping on one of these, you'll be instantly transported to 18th century France. Ironically, the drink, which originates in the 1920s, is actually named after the 75mm artillery gun used by the French in World War II, but the sweetness in the bubbles taste a lot more like high society than trench warfare, at least to me. So here's what you're going to need. 2 ounces of brut champagne. Honestly, don't worry if you use anything cheap, dry, sparkling, we won't tell. 1.5 ounces of gin. A half ounce of simple syrup. You can buy it in your grocery store, or you can make some by melting together equal parts sugar and water. And then finally, a half ounce of lemon juice. You're going to shake the gin, simple syrup, and your lemon juice with ice. Strain the mixture into a champagne flute. Then you're going to top it off with the champagne, put on your ball gown, and enjoy. You'll be talking smack about the Duchess in no time. But before I wrap up today, I'd like to offer one variant, if I may. So Tim, when you spoke to Riley Stock recently on the Board Game Community Show, Riley mentioned that he enjoyed the drink segments, but he doesn't actually drink alcohol. And that, that really kind of hit me. Like, what a great point. I mean, everybody enjoys a tasty drink, but not everybody wants the booze. And I suspect, honestly, for me, that makes the quality of my gameplay drop considerably. So maybe I'd be better off if I wasn't having so much booze with my games. But so for Riley and the other non-drinkers this week, I've got a virgin mocktail to offer you. So I haven't even met Riley or talked to him, and yet here we are collaborating already. I wanted something that captured the spirit of the original drink, but without the booze. So if this sounds more up your alley, take the original recipe and you're going to swap out the champagne with sparkling apple juice and infuse some rosemary into simple syrup to approximate the herbal taste of the gin, and then mix 1 part lemon juice, 1 part rosemary infused simple syrup, and 2 parts sparkling apple cider. And you are going to be able to party just like all those booze hounds, but nobody is going to have to carry you home from the ball. And thanks to Riley for bringing this up. And in honor of that, I've named this drink the Lock, Stock, and Barrel.
Very nice, Chris.
I like it. Hey, Chris, how do you infuse rosemary into simple syrup? I don't know what the process is there. I'm sure this is not an uncommon thing, but fill me in.
So simple. Just take a piece of rosemary. I actually have a rosemary bush right outside my kitchen door, so I just grab one off there. But you can get it in the grocery store. You put in 1 part sugar, just table sugar, and 1 part water in a pot along with your rosemary, and just put it on a simmer until the sugar is all dissolved. And you've got then this syrup that tastes like rosemary.
Okay.
It's actually quite delicious. In fact, I think I enjoyed the virgin version of this drink more than I enjoyed the actual boozy version.
Very nice. Very nice. And believe it or not, I think I actually got the drink right tonight, and it was delicious. I don't even have any high drinks to mention about making this drink. But I do have one thing to add to the theme. So while you're playing Rococo and you're drinking your French, 75? Is that what you called it? Then turn on Arcade Fire. They've got the song Rococo. Put it on your playlist on repeat for the next hour and a half, and you'll hate me by the end of it.
Nicely done, Tim.
All right, well, let's jump into what's been on our table this week. Jen, let's start with you. What have you been playing?
Tim, I have been playing a phenomenal game called Isle of Cats. As you know, as you've played every game that I've played of that game, I just really enjoy it. It's medium weight. There was a little bit of time at the beginning that it took to learn, but we as a group, we got pretty much into it after the first play, and then we've been requesting it ever since. Does anyone besides Tim, have either one of you guys heard about Isle of Cats?
Heard about it.
Played Isle? Heard of it, yeah.
No plays.
But no plays yet? All right, so the short version is that there's an evil lord that's coming to take all the cats away from this island, and we want to stop this from happening, and it turns into like a card drafting game, and then essentially a cat drafting game, and I don't know, I just get a kick out of it. It's a lot of fun. It has like that Tetris feel because you're trying to fill up your boat with these cats, and I don't know, I don't want to get too into it because honestly I want to play it with you guys and see how you feel about it. It's a very satisfying game so far, and we've had it on repeat, and I cannot say enough fun stuff about it.
The Isle of Cats was created by designer Frank West. I think it's self-published. I think his company is called The City of Games. It's been a pretty big hit the last couple of years. If any of you listened last week, you'll notice that we've been going a little bit deeper into the games that are on our table in this segment. But I specifically chatted with Jen before the show and said don't go too deep because I think this is a game that we're going to want to do a full review on coming up here. But I agree with Jen. We've been having a great time playing it. Really cool production, but we got a lot to say about it. Mostly positive, but some quibbles as well. So be interested to play it, hear these guys' points of view, get a little bit deeper on that one.
So here's maybe me being dense, but is the name of this game a play on words?
I think it is. I love cats. I love cats. Yes, I think that's the intention. Okay. I love cats.
Okay. I wasn't sure. Thank you.
Jen, did you catch that? Just curious. Did you ever catch that?
No, I love it though.
I never realized that until just now. It shows how dense I am. Yeah.
I think that, but if out of the 4 of us, those are the 2 cat owners, correct?
Yeah, that's right.
There you go. Adam and I are like, yeah, cats. I guess we got to save them for the game. And the 2 of them are like, save all the cats. We love the cats.
All right. Well, Chris, what about you? What have you been playing this week?
Man, it has been a big week for games. I've actually been having a great time. Got a couple of guys that I've been playing games with here in Portland, and that has been just super fun. But it's really been fun in particular because they've introduced me to some new games that I'd never played before or even heard of before. And in fact, they seem to have a real fondness for Reiner Knizia, and I was completely unfamiliar with his games before playing them with these guys. And I will say it is not necessarily my style of game all the time, but super fun. We played Yellow and Yangtze first, And we've also played Modern Art, which, going back to BGG, it appears that it was actually his first major game. It's from 1992, so quite ancient in the modern board game world, but lots of fun. The first one, I got my butt kicked on roundly with Yellow and Yangtze, and in the second one, I actually won yet to this day. Having won the game and played it, I have absolutely no idea what the idea of that game was, so clearly it wasn't because of my prowess. And then I got a couple of games that I've been playing at home, which I've been having a great time with. Well, maybe one of them, great time is the wrong term, because it's this War of Mine, which many people have probably heard of before, and it is more of an experience than an actual game. Quite depressing. It's about life in a war zone, and it's intended, I think, more as a way to experience empathy with people who may be suffering through that kind of an existence than it is an actual game that you want to play and win and have fun with. But that's one I just got, and I've got it set up, just got a game started, and it's been quite interesting. And the last one is a game that I got a couple of weeks ago, and I've been dying to try, and finally got it on the table today, and that's called Nunami by Tomasi Maniok, self-published. He advertises it, the first modern board game designed by an Inuit designer. It is so clear to me that there's a different perspective coming to this game that is an incredibly valuable aspect of it to me, because I think one of the things that we've talked about before that's missing in our world is a diversity of voices coming to board gaming. So in Nunami, you have the game spread over a series of hexes, depending on how many players you have. It's a 2 or a 4 player game, interestingly, which is an unusual player count. And these hexes get set out, and each one of them has 6 triangular spaces on it. You get cards, these little triangular cards that fit into the spaces, and each of them is either going to have something neutral on it, like sand or snow. It could have something human on it, like a person or some kind of development, or a child or a hunter or what have you. Or it can have something of nature on it, so a scenery or an animal or a landscape, that sort of thing. And generally, the cards that are nature cards have a negative value to them, not only negative in terms of numbers, not in terms of the idea that there might be something negative happening there. And people have positive numbers. And you keep maneuvering and placing your cards, and it's a draw and place kind of mechanism. And each time you draw and place, there are certain rules that apply, but ultimately you're trying to fill up these hexes. And once a hex gets filled, you score the hex. And there's 2 different ways that you can score when you do that. You count up the total number of cards, the total numbers associated with those cards, and if the number is between 0 and 6, then a point goes to the human side. Anything over 6, so 7 or above, and all the human cards at the top level get cleared off the game board. Conversely, if you have the number between 0 and -6, then a point gets scored for the nature side, and if you go -7 or below, then all the nature cards get cleared. And essentially you keep doing that until you've either got the landscape is in harmony with itself, or you've got an empty space there, and once you've got an empty space, then you don't have to score it anymore. So you're going to keep going through this process until one player has 4 points, which doesn't take a whole lot of time. This is a really quick game. It's really simple. It's easy to learn. It takes, I think I played 2 games of it in less than half an hour. So it's 15 minute game. But there's some really interesting push and pull in this game, especially as you're playing cards. I was playing the nature side. I could play, based on what I drew in my hand, I could play human cards or I could play nature cards. So you can influence things that way. But ultimately, the goal here for both sides is to keep the landscape in harmony with itself. So you can't go too far outside of the bounds of equilibrium, which gets you to your anything lower than -7 or higher than 6, is going to cause that disequilibrium and is going to start causing some pain to the people who are, placing those cards. So I thought that was really cool. I enjoyed it. It's probably a slightly lighter weight game than is average for the folks in our hobby, but I think this is a really cool lightweight game, the kind of thing you might play a few rounds of at a time if you don't have a lot of time to spend. And the art on this thing is just super, super enjoyable. It's minimalistic. It's very evocative. Everything is very white. You feel like you're out on the ice in the Inuit homelands, and I really enjoyed it. It's a lot of fun.
Chris, I got a couple of questions for you here. So first of all, the production here is really unique, and it looks like the cards you're talking about are these little triangle-shaped cards. Is that right?
Yes.
It's interesting because you have to put them into these little pie shapes, the kind of the wedges for these hexagons you're talking about. Did you find the cards, was that pretty easy to do? They look like they might be really small and kind of a challenge to deal with, or did it, was it pretty easy to deal with?
The only time I found a challenge was when I was trying to shuffle, just because it's hard to shuffle triangular shaped cards. But beyond that, it handled quite nicely. I thought it felt good in your hand, good quality, and I did not have any problems with it.
Second question was about the iconography on it. Like, looking at it, it's not clear to me what they do. Maybe it's really straightforward. Was it just a few symbols you had to understand what they were doing, or was it a lot of referencing a rule book to check?
It was incredibly simple iconography. Really, the only things that you're looking for, and there was a picture on each card, but the picture was more sort of like color commentary. It was more of just for attractiveness.
Okay.
But you looked for the power of your card, and that was represented by 0 to 3 triangles up in I believe the upper right corner. And the power was important because it dictated where you could put your cards. Like, you can put one card on top of another, but you couldn't put one card on top of another card that had a higher power. It had to be equal or lower power. The other thing you were paying attention to was the number. And the numbers are what get you to that issue of equilibrium that I was talking about before. So the negatives and the positives. And I guess the third piece would be the color of the card, because that dictates, was it human? Was it natural? And then my wife and I played with human and nature. And if you pull out the other two factions, because you can actually play 4 people, or you can play 2 people in each, there are 2 teams there, or you can play 2 factions or 2 communities, I think is probably the better way to put it, 2 communities per player and have a 2-player game. And the 4 communities overall were land folk, the water folk, I believe, nature, and the 4th one was, I couldn't say the name because I wouldn't know how to pronounce it, but it was essentially nature, but a kind of a fantastical nature based, I believe, on Inuit lore. And those 4 factions made up the human and the natural worlds, and I thought add some really interesting visual interest to the game as well.
Okay. One last question then is, you talked about Watergate last week, which is a 2-player, kind of push and pull type of game. And I get the sense that there may be some similar feel here. Would you agree with that, or is this completely different?
Conceptually, I understand what you're saying, and that yes, there is push and pull in the sense that, someone puts down a card, they clearly have a goal for they're trying to get the numbers for that particular hex into a certain range, and then you have the opportunity to put that, move that in a different direction. But really, in terms of the feel of the game, there was almost no similarity. This one was fairly unique.
Okay, sounds good. Well, that sounds really cool, Chris. Thanks for sharing that with us. Adam, what have you had on your table this week?
The game that has been on my table this week is Shamans, or as Michael Jackson calls it, Shamans. Designer is Cedric Chabus. I don't know if it's Chabusit or Chabusset. The artist is Maud Chalmel. And this is a beautiful looking trick-taking game with a hidden role element in it as well. So the way this game works, you start off, you deal out, you're either a shaman or a shadow. And there's more shamans than shadows typically. You can play 3 to 5 players. So you look at this card and you're figuring out, okay, what's my goal here? Am I going to be a shaman or a shadow? And if you're a shadow, you're trying to move this token in kind of a tug-of-war fashion over to the moon side. And if you get to the moon side, you win the round. If you're a shaman, you're just trying to prevent that from happening. In a 3-player game, there's 5 suits of cards. First of all, let me rewind a bit and say if you're not familiar with a trick-taking game, go back and listen to Tim's description of Fox in the Forest, and you'll have it down perfectly.
Don't do that.
Anyway, there's 5 suits. Each suit has a special power. We'll get to that in a second. So what's kind of neat about this game, in most trick-takers, you have to follow suit. You have to play the same suit. Not here. You don't have to do that. You play whatever card you want. But at the end of the round, whoever played the lowest value card of the lead suit gets to collect. There's this little tiny miniature market up in the right-hand corner of the game board, and you select one of these little tokens. Those might have an immediate use. They might have a use for later on. If you're the highest value card of the lead suit, you get to keep the lead. You get to keep choosing which card comes out next, which is the lead suit for the next round. Now, if every card from that suit has been played, then you get to activate the special power of that suit. So you're kind of choosing if you want to keep the lead, if you're able to. So you can activate these powers, score some points. Some of these powers let you eliminate a player from that round. If you eliminate a shadow and you're a shaman, you get some points. If you eliminate the wrong guy, you get some kind of deleterious effect. Different combinations of different things you can do score you different points. So you do that over and over until somebody ends up with 8 points. At that point, the game is over. What's great is, if it wasn't clear from my description, I don't think anything clear from my description, each round you deal out these shaman and shadow cards again. So maybe you were a shaman last round, but this round you're a shadow. So that switches. And so, you get extra points if you find the shadow and if you're able to eliminate them from that round. So it's neat. It has that hidden roll, which I don't have any games that have a hidden roll, so that's kind of novel to me. And a trick-taking game. I don't have any fancy trick-taking games besides a deck of cards like spades or hearts. Again, that's Shamans, having a lot of fun with it. The art is beautiful. Looking to play this game more and more. Hopefully I find a crowd of people that want to play it with me. Have you guys heard of this game or looked into it at all?
Never heard of it before you just mentioned it. It looks very cool. The art on it's really neat, and it sounds like a really interesting, it seems almost fairly complex for a trick-taking game. Would you agree with that, or is it simpler than I'm understanding?
It did seem like that. I mean, the rulebook is only like 4 pages. But yeah, there's a lot going on here for a trick-taking game. But again, it's one of these ones after a couple rounds of play, you're like, oh, I get it. I see what's happening here. The only weird thing was figuring out what each suit, kind of what their power was once they max out, once all cards of that suit have been exposed and played, and how to work that into your strategy. So that was kind of the complex part, but also the interesting part. And it's pretty neat how you don't have to follow suit, so you can start ditching cards in expectation they'll be able to take the lead at some point, or you'll be able to play the lowest card at some point and get that reward or that bonus and kind of develop your strategy and your way to win the game.
Yeah, I'm curious, Adam, how did you come across this one?
It's a relatively new game. It's been getting hyped from different reviewers that I admire their opinions. So I might have been on Shut Up and Sit Down's latest enjoyable card games. And since I'm easily influential and I have a weak mind, I went out and bought it.
I know that feeling.
And it jumped ahead a whole bunch of those poor games that are sitting on his shelf of shame, just waiting to be played. It sounds very cool, Adam. All right, so the one thing that's been on my table this week is, we reviewed Viticulture, the game by Stonemaier Games. Jamie Stegmaier and Alan Stone are the designers, but they designed that game, I think, back in 2013 as well. We reviewed it back on episode 19, sorry. I really liked the game, picked it up. I picked up the Tuscany expansion not long after, and I talked about that in detail on episode 40. I was really impressed with it. But there's one thing that I've heard, occasional criticisms of the game for people that haven't been happy with their plays of it. There's 2 things. One is that there can be a strategy where you don't ever make wine at all in the game, and you can still win it. And typically the way you would do that is that there are the summer and winter visitor decks. And there's a number of different ways that you can gain victory points just by drawing these cards off the deck and occasionally playing them. Maybe you meet a certain condition or you trade in some money for points and things like that. And so that's been a criticism for people that feel like, hey, I've been working my way, building this whole thing, and then somebody else just ran away with the victory by playing and discarding, picking up and discarding a bunch of cards. The other criticism that I've heard occasionally is that those same decks, the summer and winter visitor decks, can make the game really unbalanced, because what I draw off that deck might not be that useful for me. Someone else draws a card that just perfectly hits their strategy, and all of a sudden they just rocketed ahead to victory. So when I heard about this little mini expansion that Stonemaier Games released for Viticulture called Visit from the Rhine Valley, And the entire intent of this little expansion was to replace the summer and winter visitor decks and make it so that you really had to focus on the winemaking strategy. So they kind of work the same way as the original base game, but they give you different tools to enhance your strategy and move ahead. So I wanted to take a look at it. I reached out to Stonemaier Games and they sent me a review copy, and I've had a chance to play it a number of times, kind of replace the original deck. So first of all, I did a little analysis here. The original deck of cards, the Winter Visitor deck, has 20 cards in there that have the words gain victory points. So it's gain and then some number of victory points. The summer deck had 16 cards that do that. So I think there's somewhere around 40 to 50 cards in this deck. So you got a pretty significant amount in those base decks that allow you to just get victory points. And that's kind of the thing they were trying to fix here. In the new ones, I counted them up. In the winter deck, there's only 10. So there's half as many cards that actually can give you victory points. And in the summer deck, there's only 5. So there's about a third of the count. So quite a few less. And when I was looking at the differences between the cards, I'm going to give you an example. In the original deck, there was a card called Handyman. It says all players may build one structure at a $2 discount, and then you gain a point for each opponent who does this. So you play this card. If your opponents decide to take advantage of this nice little bonus they get, you just get victory points. It doesn't have anything to do with winemaking for you. You picked up and you played a card. An alternative, one of the 5 cards in the summer deck, the Sommelier card, that basically gives you a couple options here. But it says if you have the tasting room, you can discard a glass of wine to gain 3 victory points. So there's a way to gain victory points, but you actually have to give up something that you had to make in the winemaking process. You had to have already harvested, planted a field, harvested it, made wine, and now you can get some victory points for it. So you can see that even in the cases where you can get victory points, it really is focused on having to have built up that engine and then turning that into wine, similar as if you were selling wine. So it does objectively fix the problem of being able to win this game or do really well at it without making wine. You're really not going to do that with this deck. And my play experience with that really enforced that. I really wasn't seeing any opportunities to just get points. I really had to build up my wine fields, make wine, and take it to market. I'll be honest, I never had a problem with that. I kind of like when games give you alternate routes to victory. So the point options in the visitor decks were never a problem for me in Viticulture, but this does seem to address that complaint that some people have had. I have, though, experienced some of the swinginess of these decks in the base game where I would draw a card, almost does absolutely nothing for me. I just can't use it at all. So the best thing I can do is discard it and hope that I draw something else. And then the next person draws a card and they're like, oh, wow, I meet all these conditions. Give me 4 victory points. And it just always felt like, hey, the game is this process of building up these engines, but you got lucky, you drew a card that worked for you and I didn't. And that can feel really frustrating and painful. I took that in mind as I was playing this game. And I can't say objectively in this case that it's fixing that problem or that concern that I personally had, but I can say that it felt like a much smoother experience. It felt like the cards were very useful. They always helped enhance my ability to kind of create wine and go through this whole process in a fun way. Usually taking that space where you're playing a yellow card or you're playing a blue card was a reasonably powerful effect, but it never felt like it changed the capacity for me to do well or to win the game. And most of the cards seemed really valuable. So from my perspective, I think this is a really solid expansion. If you like Viticulture, if you're playing it a lot and you had either of those concerns, I think you should give this a try. I would never not play with this deck. The other reason you might want to play with it is just for change of scenery, basically. If you've played Viticulture a lot and you've played the normal deck, you've seen a lot of the same cards over and over again, this gives you a lot of similar feeling effects, but just different cards. The names and the art on most of the cards I think are the same. I noticed at least some that were similar, but the effects on the cards are significantly different, but I think in a really positive way. So I really like this expansion and I would always play with it, whether playing with the Tuscany expansion or without. This is a no-brainer for me just to include in future games. Maybe I'll switch it out sometimes for the original decks just to get some variety, but really liked what this expansion did. So I would check it out.
That's a great game, and I honestly never thought of there being a problem with that, but maybe that's just because I had never used or been the victim of that strategy before. So I'd be interested to try that, though.
Let's just jump into our future take segment. I'm just going to mention one thing really quickly, and I won't dwell much on it because I've mentioned it before, but there is a game up on Kickstarter right now called Earth Rising, 20 Years to Transform Our World. Mentioned it a few episodes back. It is successfully funded. It's still going to be up on Kickstarter about 2 weeks from when we're recording this. probably for at least another week after the episode is available. So if you haven't looked at it yet, at least go check it out. I think it's a really interesting project, a game that looks pretty fun, but also has some pretty important messaging going along with that. Adam, what about you? Anything that you're looking at down the road?
Fractal, Beyond the Void. All right, there's a slew of designers here. I apologize in advance. Iker Uriarte, Bernardo Ripa, Romain Lisiuk, and Jan Hilaire. The artist here, though, the art is fantastic. The artist, there's only one credited, Tom Lopez. Nice job, Tom. Your art is beautiful. It's this science fiction 4X world that is, I don't have anything like it. Maybe the Awakened Realm stuff comes kind of close in their big game on GameFound they just released, but the art here is just fantastic. It's evocative. It makes me want to go play around in this world and explore it. It says it has legacy elements. There's nothing that's going to get destroyed, like in a Pandemic. I've never played Pandemic Legacy, but apparently you destroy stuff and get rid of components. Not in this game. There's going to be a legacy element, so you play a game once and you pack it up, play again. Next time you play, it's going to be different because of what you did the first time you played it. So that's cool. There's a handful of factions here. There was an unboxing video recently released. The components look amazing. Chris, I'm looking at you. I can't wait to hear your take on this game. And it looks spectacular. I love Eclipse. This game looks like it has a little more, I don't know, it just looks different. The art look, for one, I think is a little nicer. We'll see. My hopes are high for this game. My expectations, I'm going to try to tamper them, but the game looks fantastic. It looks beautiful. It looks right up my alley. A 4X combat, civilization building, some neat mechanics for combat. I don't think there's any dice, in fact. I guess this offers a nice alternative to Voidfall if you're looking for the anti-Euro 4X game out there in space. Take a look at Fractal, Beyond the Void. I believe I read a post from the designer on Board Game Geek that they are going to announce soon the date that this is going to come to Kickstarter. But as of right now, there hasn't been a date announced. My sense is that it will be within the next month or two. There's a whole series of design diaries out there. And like I said, there's a recently released unboxing video of a prototype, but the component looks great. The art looks great. I'm interested to see how the gameplay goes. I'm gonna have a tough time not buying this one. Fractal, Beyond the Void.
Chris, what about you? Anything that you are looking at down the road here?
Yeah, it's actually a continuation of what I was talking about that's been on my table this week, which is I'm really looking forward to digging into this War of Mine. I just gotten started with it, and it's incredibly interesting. I'm really looking forward to moving that game forward and trying it and experiencing it, and honestly having my heart broken a little bit by the mechanisms of the game and by the inability to, do something in this game that's going to make you feel good. Life in a war zone is not a pleasant thing, and it's not supposed to make a fun game. But I'm looking forward to experiencing some of the heart-wrenching drama that comes out of a game like that, and just also experiencing a type of game that is very different. It sounds pretty unique, and I'm looking forward to really experiencing that.
Chris, so with you got it set up on your table, you started to play through it a little bit. Did it surprise you as far as how it plays or anything? Is there anything that you just weren't expecting that you're running into in the game, or does it feel like something else you've played before?
It doesn't feel like anything I've played before, and it's not supposed to. It's really more of an experience than a game, is the way I've heard it said. Truthfully, I listened to so many reviews and commentaries on it that it didn't surprise me much when I actually got it out there and started trying it. But it almost feels to me more like choose your own adventure with some dice involved in it, because there's a lot of the story is driven by this really thick book called the Book of Scripts that gets into the details, the backstory of characters, things that happen on a day-to-day basis. And a lot of that is driving the story. The game mechanisms themselves, the jury's still out on whether this makes a great quote-unquote game or not. But the storytelling, which I've just started dipping my toes into, feels intense and emotional. And I think that's really what I was hoping for here, because there's plenty of good games, But what makes this game unique is the emotional connection.
Well, interested to hear more about your thoughts on that, Chris, after you've actually had a chance to play it a bit and dig in on it. But something to look forward to. That will wrap up our episode of Board Game Hot Takes. If you are interested in following us on social media and interacting with us there, we do love to chat. We'll respond to pretty much every message that you put out to us. You can find us on Twitter at BG_Hot Takes. You can find us on Facebook at Board Game Hot Takes, on Instagram at BG_Hot Takes. Until next week, take care, everybody.
Good night, all.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for having me.